Hi, guys. My name is Yuki Jackson. I'm a poet and educator here representing Flan, which is not just a name of a dessert, but is also an acronym for the Florida Local Artists and Writers Network, which is basically an effort to unite and highlight artists and writers and arts communities throughout the state of Florida. And I am super excited to be speaking today with Dustin Harewood, who is an amazing artist and also an art professor based out of Jacksonville, Florida. And Dustin's, art practice has enveloped themes of multiculturalism and the consequences of industrialization and colonialism. And so, we're going to kind of delve more into his work. And his artwork has been exhibited at arts institutions and galleries and spaces throughout Florida, as well as in Washington, D.C. and Barbados. So thank you so much, Dustin, again, for talking to me today. I'm so excited to be speaking with an artist that I love, your work. So yes, I'm excited to learn from you. And like I had shared with you a little bit too, I first encountered Dustin's work through piece he made that is being displayed at a local coffee shop in Jacksonville called Brew 5 Points. So shout out to them. And so at Brew 5 Points, they, have displayed some, great art from local artists. And among them was a piece of Dustin's that really spoke to me. There's just elements in it, some subject matter, with some of the, Japanese language, like newspaper, I think, clipping maybe
Yes,
incorporated
yes.
in it. And also the servant hand, the gloved hand, which is also it's like a recurring kind of theme in my art and work as well. So anyways, I've just kind of so it was like the many elements, and even like the underwater bottom of the ocean thing is all, so I was just like, wow, has so many elements. So it just really spoke to me. So I, since that's a piece that I first entered into your work with, I
Mm.
wanted to ask if maybe kind of entering in this conversation, if you can share first about that piece, and then we can kind of delve into some of your other work.
Yeah, sure. And it's great to meet you, and thank you so much for inviting me on. This is fantastic. It's fantastic. That particular piece, so Brew 5 Points. We love Brew. Brew's a fantastic place. One of the owners, Callie Marie, she uh she came to me a couple years ago, and she was saying that she just had this vision of like having a permanent art installation in the space, and it was all going to be like blacks and whites, and that's how she saw it, and there would be no everything would be flush, and so she was remodeling. So I remember talking to her about that, and then she was asking for something of mine to include. So that's how that ended up there, and I think she did such a nice job with the whole space, so very happy to have that piece included. I do not remember the name of that piece. I apologize. I don't remember if I titled it or not, but it definitely, my work. So I'm married to a woman who's from North Japan, and we have 2 children. And so what's fascinating is my family's from Barbados, and that's where I went to high school. Um, so my first trip to Japan, I noticed I was shocked. There was a lot of it that was very alien to me. And then, but out in the countryside, and especially kind of near the water, there was something very familiar about it. And I was like, why do certain parts of this place feel just a little bit like I'm in the Caribbean just for a second?
Mm.
And then I snap out of it. And so that was very strange. So then I started to connect the two as these two island cultures. Obviously, Japan, a very big island,
Mm.
right? And this idea of the ocean and the water and all that stuff being such a big part of the identity of these island places. And then, yes, and then having these two little children and seeing them move back and forth between those spaces, that I found very interesting. So a lot of the art just started to reflect what was going on in my life. And the newspapers you saw, where every time I would go to Japan, I would bring newspaper back with me for the specific period of time that I was visiting. I did that the first time in 2010, Yuki, because it was so surreal being there that I almost felt like I needed to bring newspapers back as proof that I was actually there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, did this all really happen? Like, is this real? So that was the first reason. And then somehow the work, then I started to collage those newspapers into the work. So that's what you were seeing. The reef references were me referencing Barbados. And so with a lot of the work, and then there's subtle nods to Florida there as well, where I live. So a lot of the work is about location and about these three cultures. So Japan, then Barbados, and then North Florida. Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you.
Yeah, no, it's I yeah, no, because I love how, you really weave together these themes in such like to me it's an like a fresh way. It's like yeah, it's like so striking. And it's so full of life to me too.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
which is something that I really admire in your art. And like I was sharing before too, like even in, and I know some of those themes carry over and some of the imagery in another exhibition that you did that I attended, after I had initially encountered your piece at Brew Five Points. An artist friend of mine had invited me to, or told me about the Jacksonville Past, Present, and Future exhibition
Mhm.
at the corner
Yeah.
gallery, put on by Moving the Margin. So I didn't know that was, your, and I was like, oh my God, this is the art, and so yeah.
So you had already seen the piece at Brew and then
Yes.
made a connection when you saw it again? Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah, so
perfect.
I first encountered you with your piece at Brew, and then
Okay.
and then I had like looked you up online and stuff like that, and then yeah, later, like I guess like a couple months later is then when my friend had invited me or told me about the it was the opening night event for your Jacksonville Past, Present, and Future exhibition. uh,
Yes.
it was a group exhibition, right? And so yeah, I was just so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, there's this work again, so so
Great.
yeah, I just feel very grateful to see it again. And so yeah, if then you can kind of if you could kind of share a little bit about that exhibition and that experience, and maybe some of your work in there that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, sure. That show, so I showed with a photographer named Malcolm Jackson
Mhm.
and Jordan Walter, who was a former student of mine.
Oh.
And then yeah, and Tony Smoligic, who is a fantastic photographer and the director of Create Jax, which is this big blog in North Florida. And the reason why, so Shawana Brooks, who I heard that you interviewed recently, right? So she has artists in residence who come into that space for a couple of months. And so I'd done a show with those three guys called, what do we call that thing? The Legend of the Black Cowboy, because Jordan Walter for years had wanted to do this show about black cowboys and all this research he'd been doing. And so Shawana was at that opening, and the opening was crazy. And she was just like, okay, I need you all to come over to my space and do something. So that's the reason why that same set of the four of us went and did something at her space. And that was for, was it the 200th anniversary of the founding of Jacksonville? So that show was very much about where Jacksonville has been, where it is now, and what we were seeing as the future for it. So yeah, yes, that's what that was. Yeah. I don't know
So
if I answered your question in that.
yeah, and then even, the fact that so I noticed too, like in the way that you guys are so united and like, yeah, the way that, really coming together, to me is also very inspiring, form of artistry in itself, right? With the, with
Yes. So what I will tell you right now, so those boys, I'm older than those boys. I'm a bit older than those guys. So I think it was very important for me to show, how I put this, with all the time that I have as an artist and as a creative, I'm very much interested in the generation that's coming up behind me.
Mm,
So I purposefully had been showing with them because to me they are artists at the beginning stages of their careers who are very, very talented. And sometimes because this and that's the third collaboration with Jordan and Malcolm, because we had done a show called The Black Beach, which was about, right, it was about the American Beach in Amelia Island, like the first resort in Amelia Island. And so we had done that show together just before the pandemic. And sometimes I'm offered shows, and sometimes I know artists who are very talented, but who just never had the opportunity to show in specific spaces. So there have been moments where I deliberately wanted to show with some younger artists that not as many people know about as I think should. And that's how that whole collaboration started. And I love it because then that keeps everything fresh. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the being the ultimate mentor then, right? I mean, especially that, yeah, one of them is your former student and, yeah,
Yes.
too,
Yeah.
that's like the example of like, ushering in and nurturing and supporting new talent and, working alongside them at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so this idea of building community. So let's so I feel like I'm doing a very boring interview so far. So I need to like kick up this energy here a little bit. The thing that has annoyed me about a lot of artists in the past has been it's very much about it's very much like an individualistic endeavor,
yeah,
and in the end, it's like, look at me. Like we're all like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at what I'm doing. Right? I'm talented, I'm special. Look here. And so I felt like when I would get in positions where I might be offered solo things or whatever, sometimes I would take them, but sometimes it would be like, well, you know what would be more interesting is the conversation. And what's also important is this idea of building and helping
hmm,
other artists that you really respect and in collaboration to make things even more interesting and engaging. So Tony and Malcolm are photographers, and then Jordan is mostly a graphic designer. So I was like, wow. So if I am a visual artist, but mostly like painting, collage, and then I am like collaborating a few times with these two photographers and a graphic designer, like what does that look like? You know what I mean? And then and it came out quite interesting and not like the traditional show where I it's either made by myself or a few other painters and they line us all up and then great. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, it makes sense, and I think it's really, and it's interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways culturally and the time that we're in as human beings, right? It makes sense that the form of art that we gravitate toward is also more collective, in that, maybe that's maybe how it was more at the kind of earlier stages of, humanity or, certain cultures, especially or indigenous cultures and whatnot. And then kind of, different other cultures that, kind of theory or ideology that kind of more is more individualistic, right? But that how now we're returning culturally as human beings to really appreciating the collective. And
Right.
you know,
Yes. Yeah, that's a good
and
way to put it. That's a good way of putting it. You should be a writer or something. You're really
yeah, I
good.
know. Yeah, I'm gonna try that.
But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, because art is very much about the individual, especially it's been promoted that way since I would say Van Gogh and artists of that nature, Paul Gauguin, and the genius, individual genius, and that kind of celebration of that, which is still as cool to be,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't always have to be just that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then so, and so it's so clear, with how you've been able to support and inspire others. So I'm wondering in terms of your own sort of conception as an artist, how that started, like what kind of got you into art, and then what led you to decide to, make it a commitment, a lifelong commitment that you're involved in?
It's a great question. So my beginning is the same as your beginning, is the same as everyone else's beginning, is just being a child doing art. You know, that famous Picasso quote is like all children are artists. The problem is how to remain one once you become an adult, right? And so when did I start? I started when you started. I started when everyone else who's going to be listening to this started. And I think I have a West Indian family, so they were very conservative. So they came up here into the United States in the 60s to New York City. So I grew up there, but my dad was very much like, well, you could do whatever you want, but you can go to medical school. But you can do whatever you want, but doctors get paid very well. You can do what you want, but medicine and science. So I ended up majoring in biology in college. I went to NCCU, a historically Black college in Durham, North Carolina. And so when I came up from Barbados, I was drawing comic books and doing all this drawing stuff I'd always drawn. And then I was pre-med. That's what I was gonna do. I was all in because I was like, I like biology, I could do this. And I would say the first year, and I got a scholarship and everything coming out of Barbados. The school system is really good. So I got a nice little academic scholarship. Everything was good first 2 semesters. And then sophomore year comes and we're getting out of the general biology and we're getting into some physics. We're getting into some organic chemistry. We're getting into some like advanced math. And then I was just like, oh my God, like I hate all of this. Like, wait, I have to do this. And I started slacking off. My GPA went way down. I got a letter threatening to put me on academic probation. Of course, lost the scholarship. And so I had this moment where I had to talk to my parents, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I have to major in art because that's the thing I had always done through school. I was mostly drawing comic books and doing all sorts of things like that. But I was like, I think if I'm going to stay in school, then it's going to have to be art. That's the only way I can see this working. And so it was from that moment. And then there was a switch. And then, yeah, then I was on this track. Yeah.
And then so in the beginning, so then how hard was it for you to that once you decided to remain true to this path, or did you start to kind of deviate, kind of go back or change your mind or experience anything like that?
No, once I got on the track, I was on the track. I think in the senior year of college, again, I was still immature. So I think I remember like I had a whole class of us. And so I'm doing the art, but I felt like I was kind of talented at it. So I wasn't always the hardest worker still because I was immature and dumb. And then I remember an art professor, we had all handed in a project and he just looked so disgusted with all of us. and I remember looking at his face and just looking at him like shaking his head. It's like, what are you all doing? And I remember being embarrassed. And then as I was walking to my car after class, I have this nice little superpower where if I feel slighted, I get angry and then the anger turns into fuel. And I think it was at that moment where I saw him just looking disgusted at this project. And I was just like, what is this? And then I think it was that moment, Yuki, where everything kicked up into like hyperdrive. And I was just like, all right, okay, all right. I'm doing this for real, for real. And then graduated from there and then went to UNC Greensboro for graduate school for painting and drawing was my focus there. And then I met a couple of kids from Jacksonville who were a year ahead of me in graduate school. And so when they got out, they were in Jacksonville and they bought a house. And then when I graduated, they were like, would you come down and help help us pay this mortgage and hang out and teach some classes? And then that's how I ended up here. Yeah, you didn't even ask about all that, but that's where we are.
Yeah, no, but you're completely answering it. And then what you just said about even how, so it's sort of kind of, it seems like the inception of your work too is like kind of had the comic book.
Yeah, I thought I
Asian,
was
right?
gonna be drawing comic books. Like that was
Yeah.
at school. Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
now that you say it, now that you said that, now I'm like, oh, okay, now I can see,
Oh,
you
you
know,
see
maybe,
traces of it. Yes.
yeah,
Yes, in
like,
there.
yeah,
Yes.
like with even like the, the newspaper and the incorporation of the tech, in certain
Mhm.
parts or certain pieces. Yeah, and even those, the kind of cartoon hand, you know what I
Yes.
mean? I don't know. I'm just now seeing
Classic
it.
cartoon hands. Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. Yes, absolutely. Good eyes, Yuki. Good eyes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, so in terms of your choice of mediums then, so at that point, like, were you still sort of, I'm imagining or kind of assuming then there's sort of an exploratory phase, or, or did you kind of right away when that fuel hit, that rate, that like, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna, do this,
Yes.
like I'm gonna show you, you're gonna see, kind of thing,
Yes.
which is very relatable, I'm very
Yeah.
similar. Yes. Yes.
It's a good trait to have, Yuki.
Yeah, yeah, it literally becomes fuel. It's
Yes.
like energy conversion, right? So yeah, so at that point, like, so, so did you go through a phase where you were exploring other kinds of mediums, or were you kind of like always kind of gravitated toward the specific mediums that you picked, like with paint and collage, like you mentioned earlier?
It's taken years for me to arrive in the place I am now.
Hmm.
I think especially the thing about school, and I'm assuming that there are going to be a lot of people here listening to this interview who've been in school for the arts, maybe. But the interesting thing about school is that you end up making work subconsciously to please your professors, whoever your mentors are. So I think that a lot of years after I got out of school, I was making work that I felt like I was supposed to make from everything that I had learned about this grand tradition of contemporary art. So, to be honest with you, for quite a few years, I was making stuff, but I don't think anything was all that significant. And then um, I was making work, and I don't know, remember what year it was, 2013 or 2014. If you look at my show history, I did not show, I think it might have been 2013, that I didn't show at all because I had another moment where I was just like, I was making stuff, Yuki, and I was like, you know something? I don't think anybody cares anything about anything that I'm making. I kind of feel irrelevant. Like, I kind of feel like I'm in this community, I'm making stuff and people have respect for me, but like, I don't think my name as an artist necessarily resonates around here at all. And then I had this little mini crisis at the end of, I think it was 2013. I think 2012. I don't remember. And so that whole next year I didn't show. And I was trying to figure out who was I as an artist? Like, what was I gonna do? Like, who was I making art for? What is my work even about? And then I started, then I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna do some drawings for myself. And after a trip to Barbados, I started doing these little reef sketches that
Hmm.
were kind of illustrative, kind of like how I used to draw comic books way back in the day. And I had to do that, Yuki, because I was like trying to like find the reason why I liked art to begin with.
Hmm.
And I was making them for myself. And then all of a sudden, of course, I started making them for myself. And then all of a sudden, a little opportunity comes up here, a little opportunity comes up there. I show some of these things, big response. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow. And then I've been on this track to where I am now, which has been a great track. And yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So this journey as a writer, as an artist, it's not for the faint of heart. And we can lose ourselves along the way many times, whether it's with school and what we think we're supposed to do, or whether it's seeing who the artists are who are celebrated and then trying to figure out how to do more like what you think they're doing because then people will like us more if we do it that way. Yes. I mean, there's so many weird motivations as artists, and isn't it so hard? It's hard to really, with all this noise, and we're in this attention era, right? Everyone wants our attention, right? And it's just like, but who are we? Who are you?
Yeah.
And what kind of art at your core are you really supposed to be making? And that right there in itself, like life. is not this thing to me that's an immediate thing. To me, is as we age and we grow along, we make all these discoveries and we figure out who we are. And I think that the work has blossomed as I become more aware of who it is that I am. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and that resonates a lot with me too. And yeah, I think it's very profound, and that journey ultimately, even in, like you said, like being true to ourself.
Hard to
I think
do out here.
it's
It's
hard,
hard to
the pressure is great to conform, or to,
yes.
and I guess, if it is natural for somebody, right, to like have a certain kind of art, great for them, right? But it's like a matter of, like you said, to really that struggle, that difficulty to really connect to your core self, and then to produce work that's sort of in line with that. But yeah, that's I think that's definitely tough. And and I think also I believe why your work speaks to me so much is because that's what I'm feeling from it at the end of the day. So obviously there is that aesthetic, beauty, and you know excellence, that you've achieved, technically, right? But for me, and I know for a lot of people, what really speaks and comes across in what we experience as great art is not just the technical, of course, again, it's not to like poo poo that, right? Like, we know that that's important to learn so that we can execute the visions and the images we have in our heads. But what we feel from it, I think, is really from the heart of that artist. And I truly believe that's why your work is, speaks so much to me, and to many people, is because your heart. And so I'm sure that it's indicative also of that simultaneous struggle, that you had to, kind of experience, and then that time too to really figure it out. But through that, you kind of excavated, it sounds like, to get to that self. And then once you got there, then it's like, okay, boom, this is where I'm coming from. And then I think other people who are also seeking that, or to
Yes.
be that, or to seek that, are the ones who's gonna, like, it's almost like the, like frequencies, like, sound, like, it's like you're gonna vibrate at that frequency. So then, yeah,
Yes.
and it
Great
resonates.
choice of words. Great choice of words there. Yeah. And it's not, it seems like it should be easy, but I mean, really, it's like, who are we? I mean, it takes a while for you to really figure out who it is that you really are without all these influences that we have all around us, right?
Yeah.
So, and here's the other thing too. I mean, as artists, as creatives, we have a big choice to make. Do we want to make work as a hobby and as an outlet, or do we want to make money and a living from making work? Now, those are two big questions, because one road is very leisure, and it's just like, hey, I'm just going to paint whenever I feel like. It doesn't matter what I make. I'm writing and painting and just enjoy myself, quality of life. And then there is making work to sell, to live from. And that's another bag too. Boy, 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 it is.
Yeah. So within that, like, so you've clearly been able to somehow then, be able to, have a life where you're a professional, artist, and then, and, in teaching art, and then, also creating art from your heart, um,
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
so I'm wondering then, do you have, like, what kind of, do you have any, like, if you could give like advice, to other artists? I know, already you've dropped so many jewels of wisdom, but yeah, if you could kind of, give like, yeah, advice to artists, either emerging or, even established, what would you say is kind of the most important for them to like bear in mind, or to try to do themselves along
So
the path?
I think one place that art school comes up short is that, I think when I say art school, I'm talking about like fine arts, especially, is I feel like there's this very romantic notion about it. And you learn all this history, and then you're making this work and you're learning this history. But when I was all through art school, I think no one ever came and told me, basically, you realize you are basically a small business unto yourself. I don't remember anyone telling me I had to take a marketing class when I went through all of my art schooling. I don't think anyone ever told me to take business 101. uh I don't think anyone ever told me like how to handle like my taxes and how to handle like inventory and how to market and how to figure out this B word that's going to be an ugly word for the fine arts, but branding, like who you are, what you represent. And so I think there's a reason why there are a lot of artists that struggle with that when they finish school and they get out and then they feel cheesy, they feel corny, or they feel like they're selling out if they have to think actively about promoting themselves and how icky that feels. And so that's a very tricky thing. And then here comes the question again. So are we doing this because we want to make a living from it? Or is it just purely for pleasure and excuse me, philosophical pursuits? You do whatever you want then. But if you're trying to make money from it, Yuki, but then we have to think about, well, where are people looking? Where are people seeing new artists? And we're in this era where we have all these fantastic platforms that didn't exist before. And what platforms do you exist on? And then what does it look like, you as an artist existing on these platforms? And there are a lot of artists who think that it's kind of a waste of time to spend a lot of time on social media, but it's actually the place where you actually communicate who it is that you are. I mean, it's like the best platform to communicate to people who you are, what your business is. It's not a frivolous extra thing. It's actually a very vital, important thing in this context now, because, people aren't reading magazines as much as they were before. You're talking writing, right? People aren't reading like this whole next generation, not reading newspapers, right? So the question is, well, then where are they encountering your work? And then how do you find those people that you feel like your work speaks to? And I mean, getting very serious about thinking about those sorts of things, and treating it very seriously, not just the work, but that other aspect.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. That's very helpful. And then, so like for you along the way, are there any like anyone who like gave you advice, or whether it was like personally or even somebody like another artist who you really
No,
admire?
it was students. It was
Yeah.
young students. It
Oh,
was not
okay.
actually older artists, because I feel like a lot of older artists were trapped in these older systems that were becoming
Mm,
outdated. So it was like, make work, shoot the work, get good slides, whatever, submit to galleries, wait for galleries to pick you up, and then you'll be represented by a gallery. And then they do all of that stuff I just talked about. You got me? And
mhm.
I was realizing, especially choosing not to go to New York or LA or Chicago or even Miami. And it was like, wait, so I have got a good quality of life here, but the infrastructure is not here like it would be in New York City. Like, I understand now why a lot of contemporary artists go to New York City, because there are a
Mm,
ton of galleries, and a lot of these galleries have a lot of patrons, and that's the system that people are trying to tap into.
I see.
So if I don't want to do that, but then what does that look like? And I feel like a lot of people who are older than me were trying to do it the old school way, and I don't think that was working as much. I actually started getting on social media more because I got called out by like a young student who was just like, "You're not on." This was years ago, but it was like, "You're not on Instagram, Harewood." And she was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, and I was just like, "What?" And she was like, "Are you kidding?" Like, and she's like, "Where do you think all my friends go to look at stuff?" And it was like, it was listening to this young girl
Mm,
tell me that she's the one that gave me the kick in the ass to like be like, oh, like, wait, right. What year is this? Like, what should I be doing right now? And ever since that moment, I've kind of kept that like, okay, well, what's next that I need to be paying attention to? Hmm. So yeah.
yeah, I
So
love that.
that's who gave me the best advice through shaming me was
Yeah. The youth. Gotta love
yes.
the youth. They have a lot of they came here with wisdom too, right? So yeah.
Yes. Do you know
Yeah.
this is saying nothing stays the same. You're either getting worse or you're getting better, but nothing stays the same. And
100.
I'm assuming that you and I are somewhere in the same age range.
Yeah, I just turned 41.
Ah, see, oh, I'm older than you, youngin. Okay, but yeah, but no, I'm 44. So
Oh,
we're still kind of
yeah,
in that.
we're in the,
We're in that kind of
yeah,
we're in that space there. But like who best knows what's going on now than you
yeah,
know these high schools. Now I'm not saying also now they didn't know everything.
right.
Obviously not. Right? Obviously now, but we can't make the mistake of getting trapped
Hmm.
uh and thinking of doing things the same way all the time because everything is changing.
Yeah.
Everything's changing all the time. So even though AI right now, like how do we react to that? And you as a writer, you see how like AI is writing papers for people right now. AI, I'm sure AI can spit out some poetry right now. You see all the AI art that's online. And then so what do we do? What does that look like? Do we take advantage of it? Is it our enemy? Is it a fad? Is it here to stay? How do we react to it? If we are contemporary artists, we should be dealing with right now and this world that we live in right now. That's what true contemporary art is. So if that's the case, how are we addressing some of this stuff and how does it affect our process and our practice?
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. But I feel like even like you're so you have to me it's coming across like you have such a open mind to grow, right? And so that yeah, that then I feel, it's like that's an expression of humility to be able to stay open and not just like this is it and that's it, right? Like and in your desire to grow and even learning from young people, I think is also that expression of your humility. And it then to me it makes sense of like why there's such a freshness that I feel from your work too, you know what I mean, because you're literally like you're constantly refreshing yourself as a human being, so then it's like coming across too, which I love.
Thank you. These are such complimentary words. I'm gonna have to hire you to write my
Ah,
new album or something.
I'm here.
But it's what you said that software updates. We need to be doing them ourselves all the
Yeah,
time,
or yeah,
right?
or like malware can take over, right? Like easily if we're not doing it. So yeah.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yes.
So I wanted to also ask quickly, like, are there any inspirations that guide your work in terms of like it could be in the art realm or it could be non-art realm? Like, yeah, what are some of your primary inspiration?
I mean, there are a lot
Or,
of
or
artists.
does that change with that, with that aspect of things always being in flux? Or do you have any kind of like foundational, like, you know what I
So the
mean? Like
question is
something
right
that,
now, who are like
Mhm.
right now, what's inspiring me right now? You know what's so fascinating, Yuki? So we were just talking about Japan before you hit record. We were talking about some Japan stuff. I think my first trip to Tokyo like blew my mind. And I feel like Tokyo is Disney World for artists and creatives. That place is crazy. Crazy good. And I actually, when I go to someplace like Japan, I don't go to museums. I don't go to galleries. I find the deeper I'm getting into this, the less I feel like trying to go to museums to find inspiration. I like, it's got to be life. It's got to be culture now. It's like, that's where the inspiration lies. But, I'm a huge fan of an interior design company called Wonderwall, and the head designer, his name is Masamichi Katayama, and I'll send you a link to that stuff. And he basically, there was this brand, Japanese Tokyo based brand, Harajuku brand, originally called a bathing ape, and he was the designer of all their stores. So in 2010, I had figured out what bathing ape was through Pharrell years earlier, Pharrell Williams, and then so I go to these bathing ape stores, and these stores just like the interior design, just like I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so when I would go to Tokyo, I would just get this list of all the places that Katayama designed, and then I would go to visit them, or I'd go to street fashion stores, those sorts of things. And then so there's a lot of fashion stuff. There's a lot of like street fashion stuff. Then there's a lot of interior design stuff. a lot of that stuff actually really gets me excited, probably more than just looking at other contemporary art. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I know it's weird, right? And
Yeah,
that's why we did
definitely.
the store concept for past, present, future. So when Shawana asked us to do a show, and I was honestly like, I don't want to do just another art show. I think that's boring. And then I knew Jordan, the former student of mine, we connected because he was into a lot of these street fashion brands that I was into. And he knew what I was talking about when I would sneak some into PowerPoints during a lecture. And he's like, I know what that is. And I'm like, oh, you know this? And so I was like, well, why don't we do this concept store where it kind of looks like it has some aspects of our favorite clothing boutiques, and we're showing and we're making these t-shirts that have art. He's making t-shirts that have art on them, and then we're designing it in that way. And that goes, here we go full circle. So that when you walked in that show, that was kind of one of our goals when we were trying to design that space.
Yeah, I thought it was smart. And just for me, from like even that, like, yeah, like on a compositional level. So then it felt like that the exhibition itself was a composition.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So it
yes.
is like art on art. I love the Russian egg. Well, no, not the egg. What is it? The Russian doll. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, before we get into what your current projects are, and where people can find you. I wanted to ask, since this is for Flan, which is, like an alliance or, network between, writers and, also
Yes.
artists. I wanted to ask, and so I know as a writer, I'm very inspired by your work and, many, visual artists. So yeah, I was curious, or, wanting to know if there happens to be, any particular like writer or writing or any books you've read before, or a song, lyrics, anything kind of having, in the word realm. Yeah, that has maybe kind of inspired or impacted or influenced you, even just as a person or as an artist.
Okay, yes. I'm gonna I'm gonna date myself here with some of that stuff. Uh I I'm trying to think. When I do collage to me is like, I was never a rapper. I was so nice to be a rapper, never attempted.
I'm sorry, that sounds like the start of a verse too, you know what I mean? Where you're like, I was never, I don't know. It
All right, here
started
we
to
go.
sound
You
like
ready?
you're
You
about to
ready?
start. Yeah, sorry, sorry, go ahead. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a poem. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But when I make my collages, especially the reef collages, I feel like it's like visual rapping. And
Mm.
because when like my favorite rappers or these like favorite verses, I just love the way there's like all these abstract thoughts, and they all kind of make sense because it's all coming out of this person's mouth. So this is what they're thinking about here. This is what they're thinking about here, there. And it all like comes together with this flow. And then it's all encapsulated in this song. But there are a lot of great, I remember it was just the other day. It was Andre 3000 had this verse on Lil Wayne's album. It was called like, was it outro or intro? It was like, today I feel electric gray, hope tomorrow neon black. Like those are the first lyrics, but it was Andre 3000. And he's like talking about, like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna come out here. I'm not gonna start rapping Andre 3000 stuff. That's gonna be pretty lame. But he's talking about feeling like he's like a feeling like a pharaoh. He called it a pharaoh, waking up in Cairo, looking at stars so bright in the sky. I thought they were marbles. And then he switches up, and then he's like, please remember, don't feed the Simba. And I was like, wait, the don't feed the Simba. Oh, the lion. Like, and so he's like right, he's like weaving this thing, and it's so smooth and it's so abstract, and it's all making sense in the end. Uh Ghostface Killer had an album called
Yeah.
Supreme Clientele.
Sorry, I'm like, but I love the album. Yes,
Ghost.
it's one of my top like favorite. Yes.
Oh, you know this because I was scared to bring
Go
it up.
ahead. Go ahead.
So I love Wu-Tang stuff because I grew up in New York in the 80s where they were showing the old kung fu movies on Saturday mornings. So I actually knew the references when they were sampling all these references. RZA was, and I was like, wait. And so, and then, Method Man was my first favorite. And then Old Dirty Bastard was one of my favorites because he was so abstract. And then so the surprise was Ghostface was like my least favorite in the beginning. And then but he was an artist to me who started out like mediocre. And then he just like, he had this line of trajectory to where it was just like, oh my God, he might be one of my favorite rappers ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like 7 years after the original album, Wu-Tang album comes out. And it's so interesting too, Yuki, because there's some artists who they come out and they're fantastic and then they'll fade away. You know what I mean? Or their best stuff is, there's something to be said sometimes too about not peaking too early, not like being the instant star, but rather having time for your work to mature and figure out who you are, like I've been talking about before, and your life and it like builds, and it's like this slow burn, and it's like build. And Ghostface Killer, my God, when he hit Supreme Clientele, I liked Iron Man, but Supreme Clientele, I would put that on when I would paint. And it was just like that to me. He's rapping, and it felt like I was seeing
Yes.
all these amazing visuals. Like the word play was so rich.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah,
old
no,
album.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
you know this?
he's like a painter to me. Yeah, he's like, with the, like you said, with his imagery and even like his his rhyme ski, it's like all very colorful. I see like
Yes.
colors with his
Yes.
words, right? Yeah.
That's a great thing to say. Very colorful, right? And then also, one of the things I loved about him too was there's certain rappers who can like whisper and they can be calm, or they could do regular rapping, and then they're rappers, and then they can get upset. They can feel there can be a sense of urgency. They get excited, and then their voice can go from here to up here and like to me, he was so expressive
Yes.
with his feeling because there's songs that are so urgent where he's like yelling and rapping, and then there are songs where he's just like calmly rapping. And I think it was like someone like him. I was like, that he's like so expressive, and there's such a range, and so that's why people are not gonna like me. But like the old school thing with like Nas, like as much as I like Nas, it always felt like one notish, like
I
it's
agree.
very much this, right?
I
Sorry,
miss
I don't know how we got
Yeah,
here.
I mean, and then I could honestly I could like probably talk about Wu-Tang for like hours and hours.
Oh, well, we got to
I'm
do
like,
another
yeah,
one
it's
because
a
that's a whole other, we could do an hour. If
yeah.
you don't want to go there with me, you don't know who I am. We will. I mean, I have like Shaolin Wu-Tang on a VHS sitting over here on the bookshelf. I got like stuff, like
And then just this is like a side, but yeah, and then so I founded it's a youth program down in Tampa called the Battleground, and so it's a youth program in a historically marginalized neighborhood that's teaches and focuses on poetry, hip hop, and martial arts. And
oh,
so, yeah, I would do poetry. Yeah, I teach poetry based on hip hop lyricism to the kids or to the youth. And then I had a Wing Chun Kung Fu martial artist come in, and
serious.
he also happens to teach chess. Right? Like I mean, it's just like, yeah. So at one point, I didn't realize. At one point, I was like, "Am I subconsciously trying to recreate the Wu-Tang
I
Clan?"
think
I didn't realize
I think that's what you're doing. That sounds like
that.
that's what you did by
Yeah.
accident. I got Mystery of Chess Boxing. I got a VHS and a DVD of Mystery of Chess Boxing over here too. Oh, it's ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like and see, that's like old now. All that's old, right? So nobody, my 12-year-old son is like, what are you even talking about? So, but you and I will have to have a whole other
Yeah.
conversation because now, well, here's my question to you: of all their albums, like group and solo, which one resonated with you the most?
I mean, I feel like I mean, enter the Woods, 36 Chambers is
Personally,
just like
yes.
that, as a
Affection.
group. Yeah, I mean, and even though even in its roughness, even in
That's the best part.
yeah, that's like the beauty of it. And I feel like even all of those earlier, like I said, I could go into, but yeah, even those earlier like RZA beats and like how raw and grimy, like that's what I like about it. And then even, then when he lost, so many beats that he made in that house fire. I don't know if you heard
Didn't
about
know
that.
about that. No, I never
Okay,
heard.
yeah, he had like hundreds and hundreds more beats from that era
Really?
that got no, it wasn't a fire, I think it was actually a flood.
Really?
It
I
was a
never heard
flood.
that.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
like it got all damaged. And so he
oh.
kinda like had to start from scratch, and then I started to notice his anyway, so,
Well, the
uh
more money he got, the slicker it got,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
production. And then
Yep.
it lost that yes, it lost that basement kind of
Yeah,
rawness that I think
yeah,
made it sound so dangerous
yeah.
in the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was so fresh,
How do
and
you keep
kind
that edge though? See, that's the
right.
thing with all this with success and when you
Art, yes.
become known for things,
Yeah,
then how fresh can you be, Yuki, when you
right.
get branded and like people are coming to you with expectations and then all of a sudden you get lost in that. You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think like you said earlier, I think that is the sort of like, perennial, continual struggle to maintain. And I think that's what requires discipline and commitment, right? Every day, which, again, you're such an expression of, through your own art and your mentality toward your art too. And so in terms of the freshness, like you said, and maintaining and going forward, so kind of closing out, I wanted to ask you what are some current projects you're working on, or and then I know with some artists they don't really want talk about it too, but if whatever you feel comfortable talking about, and then your current exhibition. I saw something that you have out currently too, so yeah, if you can kind of share about your current work and what's out right now and where people can check it out.
Okay. Well, right at this moment, this feels like right at this moment, I'm at like the best place I think I've ever been in my art career, like at this moment, which is nice because there were rough years before, as I told you earlier. And so last December, I came off the second time showing at Untitled Art Fair in Miami during Art Basel. And like that was amazing. Like that was an amazing experience, especially doing it the second year in a row. And then that led to I have a solo show up at the University of North Florida right now, and it comes down on April 7th though. So it'll be up for a couple more weeks. So it's up till April 7th at the UNF Gallery of Art. So it's a solo show. There are 22 pieces in there. And also last month, so that opened, and a week later, then I'm in a group show in Los Angeles um, at the Alberts Benda Gallery in LA. And that's a group show called Do You See Me? And there are like six other amazing Black artists who are in that show. And so that's happening now until the 28th, I think. Is the 18th or the 28th? I should know these things. It might be the 18th. So it might be coming down in the next couple days. Um, that's in LA right up to now. And then I may be going to Pennsylvania to do a mural in June. And then I was asked to do a show in October in Florida Keys at a new gallery um, with two other artists. So, uh,
Fantastic.
so there's some cool things going on right now. So this
Yeah.
is a good moment. It's a rainy season. Sometimes
Congratulations.
with the
Yeah,
drought.
speaking of a flood, right? But it's like a flood.
Right, right.
It's a flood for good. So that's awesome.
Yes. But let's go back to 2014 or so. I didn't show anything because no one cared. So it's just like, but hopefully for all of us, I think that's what we're all looking for, isn't it? That at moment where you gain some sort of momentum where people actually look. All right. So also in Florida Design Magazine right now, Yuki, I think that's up until the 28th of March. Florida Design Magazine is an interior design magazine, but I'm on page 144, I think it is. It's like 8 artists to watch in Florida. Who knows how they put together those lists?
Yeah.
But So I'm in there like right now, and I think it's on shelf. You can get it at Barnes and Noble, you get it at Publix, you can get it wherever until the 28th, I think, of this month. So that's what I'm saying. Like right at this moment, I can feel the energy and all that momentum. And so hopefully it continues, but it'll only continue if I keep refreshing.
I love that. Yes. So thank you so much, Dustin. And I know folks can also reach you if you can share like your website or your
Yes, make it,
socials.
yeah, everybody, make it as simple as possible. Don't make it too difficult for people to find you. It's Dustin Harewood, hair like a rabbit would. And if you type that in, find me on Instagram, let me know who you are. If you heard this interview and let me know. I'll follow you back. Uh, you can find me there or on Facebook or wherever else. Just Dustin Harewood. Really easy to find me. Really easy to find me. My website, dustinharewood.com. Very easy. You can't make people work these days with there's so much stuff out here.
Yeah.
So yes. And
I-
thank you so much for inviting me on. You're so sweet. And I apologize because I was overwhelmed last week and I didn't get back to you in time. And I apologize again.
Oh yeah, no worries. That's yeah, no, like I said, I trust the timing of things. And yeah, I mean it could have been whenever. And I'm like, yeah, anytime to the opportunity to speak with you, I'm just so grateful. And thank you so much for being so generous to take this time to meet and chat. I feel super inspired by you and your work, and even more so, now through conversating with you. And I know and anticipate, everybody who watches will also be excited to, find out more about you and your work.
Well, let's
So
see. They might have gotten bored the first 5 minutes. So
I don't
might be. So
uh,
anyway, but thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity.